Well, it's November 11th, 2009, and we're here at the American Legion, Post 20 on the Quarry Road to commemorate Veterans Day, to talk about all the things connected with Veterans Day. It's been my pleasure to cover these ceremonies every year for a very long time, since I began the radio business in the North Country way back in the early 1960s. And here we have, all these years later, we're proud to bring you this event on Hometown Cable, on the various cable networks all around the North Country, as well as on the internet at Plattsburgh.com and Hometown Cable. So, I want to talk a little bit about Veterans Day. It's especially poignant for us this year because I have almost 73 years of memory of the various wars. Many of you have more, some of you have a lot less. Some of you watching this program may not be aware of the history of Veterans Day, and so I'm going to bring it to you. We've had some interesting things happen over the last few years, some interesting things happening around the country in the last few weeks. So I think it's time that we all think very seriously about our veterans and what they mean to us. Let's talk a little bit about history. World War I, known at the time as the Great War. World War I ended with the Treaty of Versailles when it was signed outside the town of Versailles, France. However, fighting ceased 7 months earlier when an armistice involved the Allied nations and Germany that went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And that was regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. November 1919, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day, saying, and I'm quoting here, "Reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with calm pride and solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in this country's wars, and because of the thing from which it has freed us, and because of the opportunity it has given America to show the rest of the nations." The United States Congress officially recognized the end of World War I when it passed a concurrent resolution. Now, in legislation that was passed much later in 1938, November 11th was dedicated to the cause of world peace and to be hereafter celebrated and known as Armistice Day. As such, the new legal holiday honoring World War I veterans. In 1954, after having been through both World War II and the Korean War, the 83rd U.S. Congress amended the Act of 1938 by striking out the word armistice and inserting the word veterans. It then became a day to honor American veterans of all wars. Then in 1968 came the Uniform Holiday Bill, one you I'm sure remember, concerning celebrating certain national holidays on a Monday. But that didn't go over so well with many people, so in 1975, President Ford signed a new law, and that returned the Veterans Day observance to the original date of November 11th, beginning in 1978. This year on Veterans Day 2009, we honor not only those who fought in our nation's wars, but all who took that solemn oath to, quote, support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies as members of America's armed forces. Of course, we remember and honor the more than 1.1 million patriots who died while in military service to America. We must never forget them. Or the 24 million other American veterans who passed on since their service. But the beauty of Veterans Day is that we take the time to remember and thank those who have defended us or stood ready to do so while they're still with us. And more than 23 million veterans are still here with us. 3/4 of them served during the time of war. All of them served, and all deserve our gratitude. That's our little prelude to the Veterans Day observances here at the American Legion Post 20 on the Quarry Road in Plattsburgh. As I'm recording this, it's 14 minutes before 11. The time and the date are essential to this commemoration, and we've been very careful to begin our ceremonies at 11 o'clock on the 11th day in the 11th month, and we'll do so today. I understand that the Plattsburgh High School band, which was scheduled to attend today, will not be here because of a death in the family of its conductor. But I'm happy to report that there will be music, and there will be speeches, there will be a time for reverence, a time for smiles, and lots of time for very poignant memories. So, the next time we talk to you, it'll be commemorating Veterans Day at the Post-Sweaty American Legion on the Quarry Road in Plattsburgh. I just thought I'd give you an idea what the assemblage looks like before our ceremonies begin. I tried desperately to put some oil on this device I'm using here, this tripod, but it still creaks a little bit as it's moving around. But there's a good group here today, as there is every day. Some of us remember former locations of the Post 20 in Plattsburgh, but it's been here on the Quarry Road now for some time. I see some nice decorations already in the room downstairs. We have a nice honored guest who will be speaking here today, and we're ready for the ceremonies to begin in just a very few minutes.
Welcome. Good morning. Welcome you all to American Legion Post 20 for our Veterans Day service 2009. Veterans Day began with the signing of a symbolic treaty between the Allies and Germany ending World War I, then called the Great War. On the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month, the auspicious date was actually a well-established religious holiday. The feast of St. Martin of Tours, a beloved soldier saint of the Army of Rome. After World War II, Armistice Day was changed to Veterans Day in the United States and Remembrance Day in Britain. But of course, the feast of St. Martin endures. The most moving Armistice Day occurred in 1921, when an unknown soldier was laid to rest in Washington, D.C. 6 American doughboys serving in the Army occupation in Germany were selected to be pallbearers for an unidentified American soldier that had been killed in action. Sergeant Edward Younger of the 59th Infantry was chosen to select a casket from 4 that had been disinterred from American military cemeteries in Europe. The sergeant, armed with a bouquet of roses, walked around the 4 caskets. On his third pass around the coffins, he was instantly drawn to one in particular, and here he placed the roses, thus selected that casket. The USS Olympia bore the body of the unknown soldier home to the United States. The unknown soldier lay in state for 3 days in the Capitol Rotunda as thousands of Americans came to pay their respects. The unknown soldier was laid to rest at 11 a.m. on November 11th. The tomb inspired simply reads, "Here rest in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." At this time, I'd like to call on our chaplain, Ron Wood, for the invocation.
Shall we stand on cover? I would like to call for a moment of silence in remembrance of 13 soldiers at Fort Hood, Texas, in their memory. Thank you, Lord. O God of hosts, we bow our heads in thankfulness for the victories you have granted us. To us and to those peoples who have united with us to stamp out the evils of aggression, intolerance, and greed, we beseech you to bring the blessings of understanding to the families and friends in this and other lands of those who have given their lives that men may be free. Grant, O God, that those close to the fallen may mingle for the pain of their losses. With the ennobling light of sacrifice, of civilization, sacrifice for a better world, for this and other generations yet unborn. Grant us too, O God, the courage to so live with the family of nations around the world that the end of strife will be the beginning of enduring peace. Grant us patience in planning for our fellow men a world in which nations may resolve their differences by peaceful means. Touch the souls of men in every land with the enduring light of wisdom, so that they may form a brotherhood of peoples which will strive to further the arts of peace under laws and ethics blessed by your love. Grant us now your continued blessings upon unity and strength that makes victories possible in war, that we may win greater victories of peace. And everybody said, Amen. Amen. Cover.
This time we'll have the posting of the colors.
Gun bearer, forward, march. Forward, march.
And salute. This time we'll have the singing of the Canadian anthem followed by the American anthem sung by Mr. Cortland Wood.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free, and stand on guard, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail, at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner
All right. Recover.
Please be seated. We'll now have a short welcome speech by our Post 20 Commander, Mike McEwen.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. We all today honor veterans. What is a veteran? He's a man or a woman who has signed a blank check for his body and his life for certain ideals. Those ideals are described in the American Constitution, Bill of Rights, and he has done this voluntarily. We don't have universal military training here in the United States. So a veteran is a volunteer, first and foremost. I wish to read now.
Mike, later.
Wait, take that? Okay.
We'll now have a short welcome from the Unit 20 Auxiliary President, Mary Simone.
Good morning. I want you all to Post 20. But as usual, I always have a few words to say. And I was thinking about it this morning, and the one thing that I do remember is let us remember. And I want us to remember today every veteran. And I was reading through one of the magazines, and it says every November from before our nation 1652 came into being, there was an honor or a thanks to those who fought on the battles. Every year, World War I, World War II, Revolutionary War. And I want us to remember, more than that, I want us to remember today that a short week ago, we were announcing and praising the fact that communism came to an end and the wall of Berlin was dropped. Not one day passed, but our nation was struck again at Fort Hood in Texas. I want us to remember, and I want to say thank you to every veteran in this room, because as long as you served one day in the military, you are still a veteran. And I'd like to share just two things with you. One of them is a verse from the Word of God, and it says, the service that you performed is not only supplying the needs of God's people, but is also overflowing in the many expressions of thanks to God. We have much to thank God for in this nation, for our freedom, our liberty, and although sometimes they seem like they are being drawn from us, I want us to remember that the victories of the past give us courage for the future, and every veteran in this room that has given us courage, and we are the ones that have to step out in that courage. So let us remember them. Let us remember those at Fort Hood. Let us remember those on the ship U.S. Cole. Let us remember those in the POW MIA camps. Let us remember that they have given their all, as Mike just told us. They signed a check blank. You signed, many in this room signed a check blank, willing to give your very lives for this nation. I want to thank you. God bless you all.
At this time, Don, would you open the door and tell Mr. Long he's ready for his musical selection? Just for you people, the PHS band couldn't be here today because the band director's mother had emergency surgery at 7 o'clock this morning. So Mr. William Long is filling in with bagpipe music. We'll now have the reading of the Governor's Proclamation by Post 20 Commander Mike McEwen.
Whereas, each year since 1926, America has officially set aside a day in November to so honor the men and women who have served in our nation's armed forces, recognizing them for their service in times of peace and war. And whereas, once celebrated as Armistice Day, to recognize the end of World War I, this splendid day is now observed as Veterans Day, a day of tribute to all our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who throughout history of our great nation have performed a vital role in defending America and preserving freedom and peace around the world. And whereas our country's history is one of sacrifice, from the first days of the American Revolution through the tragedy of the Civil War, 2 world wars, hostilities in Korea, Southeast Asia, and the Persian Gulf. And today we are engaged in conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, as each time our country has called its citizens to duty, men and women in the prime of their lives have willingly and bravely stepped forth to serve with selfless devotion to preserve the liberties and rights enjoyed by Americans and people worldwide. Whereas today we have a new generation of veterans who, like those who served before them, stand in harm's way to defend our nation, preserve liberty for the freedom-loving countries around the world, and their deeds and dedication assure us and generations to follow that America's precious way of life, one of independence, opportunity, and happiness, will endure and continue to flourish. And whereas more than 48 million men and women have served in our armed forces since the founding days of our nation through the current conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the global war on terrorism, and over 23 million of these veterans are alive today, including nearly 1 million former servicemen and servicewomen in the New York State. And whereas we owe an immeasurable debt of gratitude to these special citizens, our veterans, who through great personal sacrifice have defeated brutal foes, liberated oppressed people, and preserved our cherished ideals of democracy. And whereas on Veterans Day, we acknowledge with grateful appreciation what our veterans have done, and the crucial work today men and women in uniform continue to carry out, making America and the world a safer, more peaceful, and better place in which to live and raise our families. And we extend our most sincere and heartfelt thanks to those who have given so much to America, an obligation we can never fully repay and which we must never forget. And now, therefore, I, David A. Patterson, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2009 as Veterans Day in the Empire State.
It's working, Mike, we know that. At this time, we'll have the laying of the wreaths. You pick up your wreaths in the back, and we'll lay them up here as we normally do. Representing World War I, Napoleon Light. Representing World War II, Richard Turnbull. Representing the Korean War, Frank Pabst. Representing the Vietnam War, Walter Samodi. Representing Lebanon and Grenada, Rick Smith. Representing the Panamanian conflict, Tom Nikowski. Representing Desert Storm, Clifford Matat. Representing the Iraqi and Afghanistani War, David Graves. Representing the MIA POWs, a former POW in World War II, Robert Booth. Representing the Gold Star Mothers, Bernice Connolly, assisted by Walter Samodi. Representing the Blue Star Mounds and Badge, Alice Fountain, Phyllis Lawrence. American Legion Post 20, Michael McEwen. Representing Unit 20 Auxiliary, Marie Maggie. Representing the VFW 125, Commander Robert Racine. Representing the Daughters of the American Revolution, Susan Jones. Representing the 14-8, Stephen Yell. Representing the Sons of the American Legion, Robert Parker. And as you have heard here a couple of times earlier, we had a tragedy some 6 or 7 days ago down in Fort Hood. At this time, I've asked Lieutenant Colonel Tom Madsen to lay a wreath on behalf of the 12 Army veterans plus the 1 civilian recently discharged. And he will be assisted by the mother of a soldier that was stationed at Fort Hood, Shane Pump, his mother Dawn Bump, and mother-in-law Kathy Steele. It's most fitting to recognize them people. Thank you, Colonel. This time we'll have the rifle salute by Post 20's Honor Guard. And taps will be played by William Long. Two. Please be seated, and we'll have a selection by Ron Wood.
I would like to dedicate this number that I will be doing in honor of all veterans, and especially the veterans that are here today and that are of the Plattsburgh area. Yesterday it was our privilege to go to a couple of the nursing homes, and I wish you could have seen the response by the veterans that are now there. This song that I'm going to do was written in 1921, but it has become identified by all the militaries. Ladies and gentlemen, My Buddy. Nights are long since you went away. I think about you all through the day. My buddy, my buddy, nobody but you. understand, my buddy, my buddy, your buddy misses you. Miss your voice and the touch of your hand. Just long to know that you understand, my buddy, my buddy, your buddy misses you. Your buddy misses you.
Thank you, Ron. Our first speaker today represents the town of Plattsburgh, of which we're proud to be a part of. I'd like to call at this time our town supervisor, Bernie Bassett.
Thank you, Art. Well, I know what it feels like to lose a stripe now. My apologies for being late. The excuses are just excuses. I won't, pass that on to anyone, but I'm very, very pleased to be here. Welcome all of you. So many familiar faces. Such a large group, and I think that's an honor to the post and everything you do here. I've mentioned many times how this particular post is such a model of leadership, such a model of service, such a model of community, being a community contributor with the many, many, many activities that take place here for veterans, for community, and reminding us. Today, as I thought about this very special day, my mind, kind of wandered with how fortunate that everyone, that many people have Veterans Day off. For many people, it becomes a day with no school. But those who made this possible, in many cases, our military in service, continue today, right now, to do their duty again, so we can have even this opportunity. So and I always told the school children when I taught, most of you know, I was in public ed, higher ed for over 33 years, reminding everyone, even my graduate college students, that there's a reason for this day. We don't want to lose sight of that. It's a very high-tech world, which is a big part of why I was a little late this morning. High-tech doesn't always work. We have smart bombs, and we have laser-guided weapons, and night vision, and drones that fly out on their own, providing great tools to achieve missions. But there is absolutely nothing that can be achieved without our men and women in uniform. Absolutely nothing. And we can't ever forget that. And forget, what's in their minds as they prepare from the point they make the decision to serve. And for that today, I hope all of us today, and what's even more important, after days of special recognition, I don't care if it's Thanksgiving, a birthday, whatever it is, an anniversary, that's one of the 365. I think what's really important is that, a day like today across this country, we all are able to refocus, recharge, and renew our understanding and passion for what men and women in service have been able to bring to us. And believe me, I criticize as much as anybody, and I'm as frustrated as everyone with many things going on in government and the economy. But I make sure to remember that as far as I have been able to research and understand, this still is the best system. And you and I are blessed to be here, and further blessed to have the military, past, present, future, to make sure it remains the best system. And for that, I thank all of you, and thank you to Post 20 for this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Seeing you have a majority of your council members here, they will mark you tardy for one. This time, it gives me great honor to call our Assemblywoman from the 114th Assembly District, Janet Dupree, for a few words.
Thank you, Art. It's always so nice to be here and to see so many of you here. Certainly those who have served, all of our veterans. But as I look out, and each of us who's in this room, all of us have a memory. Mrs. Connolly, what a great article in the paper today. Certainly as a member of the Dupree family, every Veterans Day, we think of Arthur, killed in Vietnam in 1968. One of the best parts about this position and the honor to represent you in the Assembly is that I have the opportunity to attend dozens of events throughout the year. I can honestly tell you that the 2 days that I enjoy these events the most, or feel the most privileged to participate, are Memorial Day and Veterans Day. As we've just come off the month of October and the most deadly month in the war in Afghanistan, we're reminded again of all that is given for us to have our freedoms. We welcome here today Colonel Mansell, and I thank you, sir, for being here. And so close to us, that wonderful regiment at Fort Drum, and the dedication of those volunteer soldiers and the tremendous training they're receiving just 3 hours away from where we are. And certainly we recall the great history here of Plattsburgh Air Force Base and are thankful that Fort Drum continues in the North Country. And so many of those soldiers who have received their training at Fort Drum are presently serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, and quite frankly, an inordinate number of them have given their lives or have suffered severe injuries to continue to provide our freedoms. So thank you for letting me be here. Thank you to each and every veteran who is here, those we remember who are no longer with us, who have been members of this post, for continuing to provide, and certainly, Colonel, for you and your personal sacrifice and all of your soldiers, that my children, my grandchildren will continue to enjoy the freedoms that each of you veterans have provided for me and for those of us who live in this country. My undeniable and forever thanks to each of you.
Thank you, Janet. At this time, we'll have another selection by William Long. Our featured speaker today, we're honored to have him all the way here from Fort Drum. It's an honor. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Matsell was born in Carmel, Illinois on June 29, 1964. He was commissioned in the Field Artillery upon graduation from the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina, where he received a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration. Lieutenant Colonel Matzo also earned a Master of Public Administration from the Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. Lieutenant Colonel Matson has served as a staff officer at all levels in the battalion through the Joint Staff at the Pentagon and commanded at all levels from platoon to battalion. His last two assignments were Commander 1st Battalion, 94th Field Infantry, in the 1st Armored Division in Germany, and the Joint Fires Planner, U.S. Army, Europe, Hildenberg, Germany. Colonel Madson's military education includes the Field Artillery Officer Basic and Advanced courses, the Field Artillery Survey and Target Acquisition Officers course, the U.S. Army Combined Armed Services and Staff School, and the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. Lieutenant Colonel Madson's awards and decorations include the Bronze Star, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Meritorious Service Medal with 4 Oak Leaves, the Army's Combination Medal with 2 Oak Leaves, the Army Achievement Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, the National Defense Service Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, the Korean Defense Service Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Merit Medal, the Armed Forces Service Medal for Hurricane Katrina and Rita, the Kuwaiti Liberation Medal from both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, the Army Service Badge, and the Joint Service Badge. Lieutenant Colonel Matzel is married to the former Anne Marie Randoza from New York City. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to present to you Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Matzel.
Okay, been through this speech several times now and haven't gotten through it yet without getting choked up. So if it happens, forgive me. I'm told that that's a sign of a good speech. Well, you all be the judge of that. Mr. Bassett, Assemblywoman Pree, Gold Star mothers, fellow veterans, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Thank you for inviting me here today. It is a privilege for me to honor a very special group of Americans, America's veterans. I can think of no place as a soldier I would rather be today than here at the Plattsburgh American Legion in Colorado. Thank you. Our nation owes a great debt to its veterans, whose service spans every decade and continues every day of our country's existence. Through untold courage and sacrifice, America's veterans have secured the liberty which the Founding Fathers sought to establish here in the New World. Whenever and wherever the nation has called, in times of darkness and danger, as well as in times of peace and prosperity, America's veterans have been there. Veterans have proudly carried the torch of liberty for all to see. Since 1911, when President Woodrow Wilson set aside the 11th day of November as Armistice Day, which was officially made a federal holiday in 1938, Americans throughout the world have gathered, just as we're doing here today, to honor our veterans. They gather in parks, they assemble in schools, kneel at grave sites, and march along parade routes. We do these things as a way to thank veterans for their service to our nation. This Veterans Day, as for the past 7 years, our nation is at war. We continue to fight to defend our freedoms and to combat terrorism. This calls for us to honor and celebrate both those veterans whose service is recorded in the history of past conflicts and recognize our current warriors who add to our nation's rich history every day. They are stationed around the world, standing in harm's way to protect us at this very moment. 2 medals of honor have been given for service to service members for their heroism in Afghanistan and 4 for heroism in Iraq. Let me mention our most recent hero in this current fight, Staff Sergeant Jarrett C. Monty of Headquarters and Headquarters Troop, 3rd Squadron, 71st Cavalry Regiment, 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 10th Mountain Division. In Nuristan Province, Afghanistan, on 21 June 2006. Sergeant First Class Monty was leading a mission aimed at gathering intelligence and directing fires against the enemy when his 16-man patrol was attacked by as many as 50 enemy fighters. On the verge of being overrun, Sergeant First Class Monty quickly directed his men to set up a defensive position behind a rock formation. He then called for indirect fire support, accurately targeting the rounds upon the enemy who had closed to within 50 meters of his position. While still directing fires, Sergeant First Class Monty personally engaged the enemy with his rifle and a grenade, successfully disrupting an attempt to flank his position. Sergeant First Class Monty then realized that one of his soldiers lay wounded on the open ground between the advancing enemy and his patrol's position. With complete disregard for his own safety, Sergeant First Class Monty twice attempted to move from behind the cover of the rocks into the face of relentless enemy fire to rescue his fallen comrade. Determined not to leave his soldier, Sergeant First Class Monty made a third attempt to cross the open terrain through intense enemy fire. On this final attempt, he was mortally wounded, sacrificing his own life in an effort to save his fellow soldiers. Sergeant First Class Monty's selfless action of heroism inspired his patrol to fight off a larger enemy element. As President Obama said at Sergeant First Class Monty's Medal of Honor ceremony, duty, honor, country, service, sacrifice, and heroism. These are words of weight, but as a people and as a culture, we often don't them lightly. We toss them around freely. But do we really grasp the meaning of these values? Do we truly understand the nature of these virtues? To serve, to sacrifice. Jared Monty knew. The Monty family knows. The veterans here today know. They know these values are the culmination of a life of character and commitment. Today's veterans are the custodians of tradition. They are the continuity between generations. Many of them have made their duty to support those now in uniform. They know what it means to serve. They know the misery of marching for hours through cold rain, and they know the joy of touching American soil once again. From one generation to the next, certain elements of war may change. Weapons come and go, uniforms change, but the spirit moving under an American uniform remains the same. It was this way 200 years ago. It will be this way a century from now. Servicemen like Sergeant First Class Monty, as well as the veterans in the audience today, believe in the cause for which they serve. They are willing to risk everything for those to their left and their right, and for those back home. They embody our warrior ethos. I will always place my mission first. I will never quit. I will never accept defeat, and I will never leave a fallen comrade. For many young people throughout history, the experience of always placing another first, of serving something larger than you, is a new experience. The effect is profound and life-changing. For that one special period in life, whether in the night sky torn by anti-aircraft tracer fire, a limitless ocean half a world away, a border post in the former West Germany, the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan, or the streets of Baghdad, men and women share a common experience of service and will never be the same. These young people are no longer just Americans. Their decision to serve has transformed them into men and women who have stepped forward and said, "This is worth it. I will put my life on the line for America." They are veterans. To the veterans in our audience today, we need you again, now in a different role, to serve as ambassadors for our military. You can make a difference by encouraging today's youth to be tomorrow's heroes. Remember the pride of duty, honor, country, and plant that seed with others. To those of you who might be eligible for service, I ask that you consider these veterans, the foundation of our nation's strength. They do not have to ask themselves if their lives made a difference to their country? How will you answer such a question as you move forward through life? Freedom began as an idea. On Veterans Day, we recognize more than 2 centuries of men and women who, through their service, transformed the idea into a reality that is history's greatest triumph of liberty and dignity, the United States of America. On Veterans Day, and on all days, let us give thanks that we have these men and women amongst us. Let us be thankful that ours is a system that inspires heroism and sacrifice. Veterans Day is set aside to remember every man and woman who has taken up arms to defend our country. We honor every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardsman who has given some of the best years of their lives to serve the United States and stood ready to give life itself on our behalf. 25 million military veterans walk amongst us, and on this day, our nation salutes all of them. Would all veterans of our armed forces in the audience today and those who still serve, please stand. Please remain standing. President John F. Kennedy once said, "The nation reveals itself not only by the people it produces, but also by the people it honors, the people it remembers." Ladies and gentlemen, you are, simply put, all ordinary people who accomplish extraordinary things. And you have the eternal gratitude of a very grateful nation. May God bless you and the beacon of freedom, the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel, for an excellent job, an excellent rendition of a speech to our veterans. At this time, I would like to recognize a special group of people. Would all the World War II veterans in the audience please stand? They are one special group. I also want to thank the various members of the various VFW posts that are with us today. It's an honor having you join us in our services. Before we close with the benediction, I want to thank Mr. Long for filling in at the last minute with music. Really appreciate it. I want to thank the Wood brothers, Cortland and Ron, for doing a great job. I also have to thank a very, very special person. She comes here every year if she's able, Mrs. Conley. Thank you. Our various news media in the area, the Press Republican, I forgot to get your name. Kelly. Denton Publications, Jeremiah. Lake Champlain Weekly, Carolyn Kane and Rick Smith. Thank you. And our own Post 20 photographer, Bruce Brady. You're right, I forgot Gordie. You missed one time. Our hometown cable, Gordie and Mr.